It's like, what
It's been a long time since I've left the country.
That's why.
Is she, but you're going, is she going with you in April?
That is funny.
Is she going with you in April?
San Luis Obispo, yeah. She likes to run down there. There's lots of trails, beaches and stuff.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost very much to bring her. Pay for it.
You get a room with a double bed no matter what.
He's running a little behind.
Oh,
Oh, do we need a quorum for a study session? Is that,
For parks.
is that a requirement?
there's the core.
Here we go. There's a quorum.
Ah. We're on Jeopardy.
5 minute.
Okay. Evening all.
Evening. Excited about the Texas new running back.
I am.
Don't get your hopes up now. The second generation running backs are kind of like, how much gas does he have left in the tank, you know?
Thank you, David. Appreciate it,
Well,
man.
you got. Get your hopes up there, you know, just.
Jeez.
By the way, it's only 192 days till football season.
Yeah.
Don't tell my wife that. She's enjoying the peace and quiet.
There'll be, sure, we'll have some great plays for the Texans.
So he said sarcastically, hoping for a Seahawks second Super Bowl.
Oh. You watch the Seahawks long enough, you know not to get your hopes up too high.
You just won and you're pessimistic. Okay. Okay.
You're a real fan. You know
Okay.
there's-
There's two. Should have been three, but you know.
We should. Come on. We'll never get that. We'll never. All right, what's that? What Marshawn said? Sprint. Oh, well. That's what makes it interesting. No, that should be good. Should be nice to, they have another good running back.
It's not the running back, it's our quarterback.
Good. Good evening and welcome to the March 2nd study session. And we are going to be discussing Parks and Rec open space plan discussion. Page 6 in the packet. It's like 400, I think.
Yeah, it's half of them. Good news is it's half a packet. Bad news is.
Good evening, Council. Mr. Mayor, Brad Case, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Ellensburg. It's our honor tonight to present to you the draft plan of the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Sustainable Funding Plan. With us remotely is Cindy Mendoza from MIG Consulting. Cindy's been our project lead since we started this back in June of 2025. And so we have completed the work that we were set out to do, and now it is our time to present that information to you and provide the opportunity for some feedback and comments on the plan. Then we'll also talk a little bit about the schedule of kind of where we go from here. So I'll leave the majority of it to Cindy, but I will say that the last time we updated the plan in 2016, we had a little over 400 people respond through community outreach efforts. And this year we had over 1,200 people respond to the online survey. And so, it was great to get a wide reach out to the community and to get the feedback from the community. Obviously, Parks and Rec has been kind of under a microscope for the last couple of years. And so a lot of involvement, a lot of people are passionate about parks and wanted to share their opinions on what kind of our roadmap is for the next 10 years. And that really is what our park plan is designed to do, is to provide that guide as we move forward and develop park facilities and programs. So with that, I will send it over to Cindy. Cindy, I believe you can share your screen, hopefully. If not, we have IT help that can rush in. But Cindy will be. There we go.
Perfect. For some reason, I lost the sound there momentarily, but you seem to be back. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
And are you able to see the screen that I am sharing?
Yes.
Fabulous. So good evening, council members. As Brad mentioned, I'm Cindy Mendoza. I'm a principal at MIG, and it's really my honor to be here tonight to present the extensive work and community involvement that led to the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Sustainable Funding Plan. You know, the key thing here really is funding sustainability. We're going to give you an overview of this document and talk about how it ends in the sustainable funding strategy specifically for the next 6 years. As Brad mentioned, we'll take your comments and even share some comments that we heard from the Parks Commission and from the public so far. This plan is intended to be a 10-year plan that provides guidance on future investment, not only in existing parks, but also in new parks and trails that will be developed. However, I will add that even though it is a 10-year plan, it has a level of service established for the next 20 years in order to support your comprehensive plan update that is also in motion. And it really, for RCO compliance, that's a Recreation and Conservation Office, ends in a 6-year action plan, which is a capital funding plan that is prioritized to match funding streams over the next 6 years. The plan is divided into 6 chapters. I'm assured that you all have entirely read it front to back, but if not, I'm going to give you a quick overview of each of those chapters. Ranges everything from introducing the plan to identifying that implementation strategy with the analysis that we did in between. It's also supported by 3 key appendices. These are added details more specifically for staff to be able to use it in implementing the plan. The planning process did occur over 4 phases. That allowed us to collect the public feedback and get the staff and department feedback as well to make sure that this plan was consistent with community priorities. So we started in the summer of 2025. We are now here at the end of phase 4. Following your feedback tonight, we will be able to finalize the plan. In chapter 2, we present an overview of your existing park system. It presents their refined park inventory to identify the 350 acres of parkland that you have, including trailed corridors and natural open space. It counts all the different types of amenities and facilities in your system, and even maps out where those are located. In chapter 3, as Brad mentioned, it provides an overview of the demographics of your community, but also those engagement tasks where we collected feedback. And they did include different types of activities to make sure that we were hearing not only from the Parks and Recreation Commission as representatives of the community, but also from people who don't tend to respond to surveys or who may not otherwise be involved in the planning process. So staff went out to them in these pop-up events, receiving feedback from 147 people, including the last one, Bite of the Berg, that was specifically scheduled to make sure that we were collecting student comments as well from CWU. And then we checked in with 6 key stakeholders, as well as had the larger bilingual survey that was collecting feedback broadly across the community. And from these outreach activities, we heard something that I want to emphasize in the middle of this list where it says safety, cleanliness, and maintenance. It wasn't that there's a dissatisfaction with that. It is that there is just such a quality park system in terms of the youth programs that you have and the parks and facilities you have and how well they're maintained, that residents emphasize that they want to see this sustained into the future. So continue to repair and replace those amenities at the end of their life cycle. Continue to provide the trail opportunities that are fabulous in this community. Obviously, the pool and the field house were 2 top key issues to address, and those came up consistently in terms of people wanting more indoor opportunities for either recreation and/or for aquatics. But overall, there was a desire for a greater investment in the system, including in smaller opportunities such as splash pads. I want to share with you real quickly, since I'm not sure if you've seen some of the details of these findings, just a few results from the engagement. One is that when we asked people to rank top priorities for investment, the questionnaire as well as the pop-up activities all noted that it was actually the pool that was one of the top desired investments in the community. Number 2 across the board is repairing and replacing older and worn features. Number 3 varied. So I want to point out that this table shows differences between what non-residents would like to see, recognizing that the city provides important opportunities for county residents as well as city residents, and then the pop-up results separately. And there's where we see a little bit of a difference. Residents and non-residents are the similar in terms of wanting a field house. In the pop-up results, we saw trails and pathways rise to the next top in terms of priorities. But right behind that is adding variety to existing parks and other types of funding priorities. More interesting than that is when we ask about the level of city investment in the system. It was interesting to see that the majority of respondents would like to see more investment. So it's kind of a little more, substantially more, extraordinarily more. That varied between residents and non-residents in terms of the level, but we saw very few people say that you need to be investing roughly the same as you do today or less than you do today. They want better park and recreation opportunities. And the top response, specifically for non-city residents, is investing substantially more than today, recognizing that you're bringing on board new facilities. And for residents, it was interesting to see that it was pretty close in terms of extraordinarily more and substantially more of an investment. I know you're sitting there going, well, where does this money come from? It's good to be able to say substantially or extraordinarily more. That's why this is paired with more of a funding plan. And we even ask people questions with regards to where some of those funding options may be. For example, would they support a tax measure? And this is where, again, this is called kind of on the natural, meaning we didn't give them a lot of details of what this tax measure would include, what specific projects it would cover, but just in general to get their feedback about whether they would, at this point in time, approve some type of a tax measure. The answer was more so yes, whether it was a small one or yes, potentially a moderately large one. Moving into chapter 4, we did an extensive evaluation by park type and classification with regards to the level of service you provide to be able to set standards, again, based on a 10-year planning horizon to 2035 and that 20-year comprehensive plan horizon to 2045 to understand how much more acreage would be needed. While the table's not really the details you probably need to worry about, these green dots are areas in north central, northwest, and southeast that will need new parkland as the community continues to grow. The red lines show the desired trail system that was vetted in part with other trail priorities that have been identified across the city and will be further vetted in coordination with the comprehensive plan update. In fact, those trails became such a priority in many of the conversations we had that we started looking at which would be the responsibilities of the Park and Recreation Department versus which could be on-street corridors that would be coordinated with Public Works. And so this map starts to show existing trails in a solid line, plus those desired new trails to provide that circle the city loop, additional access along the river, and better connections to key parks. In chapter 5, the plan presents 9 new goals for the future. These goals and objectives are in part required for our CEO grant funding and part of what they need in a master plan, but they also are important in providing good policy guidelines for the entire park system. So they provide that overarching feedback that looks at how we balance sustainable funding with affordable recreation options for residents, or how we look at the way that programs and services activate the parks and facilities that you're providing. And that takes us to the site recommendations, which really are kind of the key pins that underlie a capital improvement plan. And I want to point out that besides those overarching system-wide goals and objectives, we definitely took into account the technical and analysis results from the needs assessment, a site tour that we did to identify the existing conditions of your parks, all of the community input that was received. We even looked at the previous master planning work that was done, for example, at Rotary Park and Reed Park, and then also took into account current initiatives that are moving forward, such as the Field House project that advanced over the course of this planning process. And from that, we identified 136 recommendations for your sites. These include 7 acquisition projects, which are those 3 new parks, as well as the key trail corridors, 81 development projects. Those are both development of individual parks, such as the new parks we talked about, but also added elements to your existing parks, such as developing a new universal play area at Kiwanis Park. And then there's renovation, which is the repair and replacement of some existing amenities that are old, worn, and in need of replacement, along with restoration, which looks at kind of the environmental enhancements that are needed to support flood control, connections to nature, and just quality wildlife habitat. So if you add these all together, you will find that there's about 117 million worth of projects. I fully understand this is way too many to achieve in a 6, 10, or even potentially 20-year planning horizon. So that made it very important for us to start to phase these projects and prioritize them based on community input to identify which would move forward in the first 6 years, which are likely to wait for the next 7 to 10 years, and which we don't think will fit within the 10-year horizon of this planning process. But what we quickly found is even within the first 0 to 6 years, to create a sustainable funding plan, we needed to look at 2 different things. One is your existing funding levels. The existing sources of funding and the levels of funding that you have were calculated over the last 6 years to identify a general 6-year forecast. And we matched those with projects to create what we call the Tier 1 priority projects. So that's the matching list that matches the funds that you are likely to have available if you continue with your existing funding sources. We'll talk about what those funding sources are momentarily. Tier 2, however, reflects the fact that the community is looking for a greater investment. The community is indicating they are willing to support tax measures. Across the county, there's discussion of a public facilities district to provide new public facilities both in Ellensburg and on the north side of the county. So we anticipate that there will be additional sources of funding obtained sometime during the next 6 years, but it's going to require some additional work to determine what those funding levels are. If they are in place, however, we identified the next tier, Tier 2 of priority projects that are desired to move forward in the next 6 years as funding allows. Looking at Tier 1, these are projects that are spread across 8 sites. There's 13 different projects. It's about $3.6 million, and they're intended to be funded through the existing level of impact fees that you are collecting, the real estate excise tax funds that you have, as well as the insurance funds you have from the prior community center that now can be reinvested into the field house improvements. In looking at these funds alone, a lot of the projects that are advancing are not only the field house, but just repairs and replacements. So adding playgrounds where needed and repairing and replacing the spray ground at North Alder Park that has been talked about so consistently throughout this planning process. Older play equipment such as Lions Mountain View, making sure that that's replaced, and even the inclusive universal play area at Kiwanis Park, because we've heard consistently that ADA accessibility and inclusion is so important in this community. There's also several projects related to Veterans Memorial Park. In particular, taking care of the existing pool facility so that it continues to be functional until a study can be done to determine whether that building is sufficient overall for renovation or whether it really needs full replacement, whether it there or a different site. And then rounding out the list again is more playground replacements for facilities at West Ellisonburg Park that are beyond the end of their life cycle, as well as acquiring land for a new park where development has already started around it. Moving on to the tier 2 priorities, these are ones where in part we see an opportunity to increase your impact fees, look at either a potential bond measure or the public facilities district, a park district, and even increase your grants and partnerships to help fund ideally another $6.9 million worth of projects. And I should mention that we are looking at capital costs only. So what you're not seeing in here is the large cost for the field house because that is moving forward by a developer and will be leased back to the city, which becomes an operations cost rather than a capital cost. So here we're looking at the opportunity to move your current older worn skate park to Kiwanis Park and then repurposing that site. Developing part of it for nearby neighbors, but a portion of the site converting it to parking for downtown parking. Also doing things such as adding a restroom to McElroy Park, replacing the playground at Veterans Memorial. Here focusing on the fact that in the North Central Park, that'd be ideal to develop that park rather than just acquiring the parkland, but the acquisition was the higher priority to make sure that you have that land before opportunities are lost. So here it's moving that forward as well as 2 of the 2 trail corridor projects. And these lists were thoroughly vetted with the Parks and Recreation Commission, who helped us refine them based on priorities for the community. Since I mentioned that those were capital project lists only, I do need to call attention to the fact that there will be additional maintenance and operations costs for this park system as new parks and facilities are added. Current maintenance and operation expenditures. So these are things like routine and preventative maintenance, mowing the lawn, doing the janitorial care of your facilities, keeping the lights on in your facilities. Those tend to run 3 to 3.5 million annually. And that includes the programs that are provided in your major facilities currently. But when you add the field house as well as the additional sites, that alone can start to increase costs to $2 to $3 million annually. So it becomes really important to maximize some of those funding sources that will support not only the capital investment, but also the operations side. So while the city has relied on general fund dollars so far to cover all of its maintenance and operations costs for the park system, adding a public facilities district, a park district, or potentially looking at user fees and cost recovery rates while keeping things affordable for your residents might be ways to increase your maintenance and operations funding. So I've tried to keep this presentation brief. I know that may trigger a lot of questions, but just want to emphasize that in terms of next steps, some of the highest priorities are going to be revisiting your impact fee methodology. That will be required as part of your comprehensive plan update, but it'll also provide a chance to look to see if that rate is set at an appropriate level to support the projects that the new growth is going to trigger. Those impacts will be important. This plan also gives the city the opportunity to apply for our CO grant funding, which will be important for some of those tier 2 projects. Obviously, the field house will continue to move forward, ideally in conjunction with this new public facilities district that'll provide additional funding for its operation, as well as any repairs or replacements or enhancements that are needed. Collaborating with partners, I must say, has been one of the most impressive things that I've heard through this planning process in terms of the involvement that the city already has from key partners to move things forward, as well as the involvement that we see in moving things forward in the future. So continuing to leverage those volunteerism and donations will be key. And then moving forward with the pool repair and replacement, in particular, identifying the best location for that and what'll be the right sustainable approach for the city. It require an additional look. And then this plan obviously provides far more details in terms of next steps for repair and replacement beyond that. Before I pause for your questions, I want to tell you that we received 11 responses to the public input form that was posted on the city's website. People had the opportunity to review the draft plan. One of the first questions we ask is, of the 9 goals that were identified in the plan, which one resonated most with them? And it was interesting to see trails coming out as the top priority, again, consistent with what we were hearing in terms of providing trails, diversifying amenities and facilities, and focusing on those indoor facilities, including the field house and the aquatic facility. So the comments that we're getting were consistent with some of the priorities we heard earlier from the community. Some of the suggestions that were made would be better addressing wind issues in parks through design and development guidelines and recommendations. Potentially considering the addition of an indoor skating rink to support roller derby, and that is not currently in the plan at all. Wind is addressed in the plan in a couple of different ways, but we did not include an indoor skate rink. There were comments about adding as a priority project repairs to the Riverfront Park Trail following flooding. I believe, and Brad can clarify, that many of those repairs are going to move forward as part of the routine maintenance that is done in parks. So that was not listed as a priority project. There was a desire for minor revisions to acknowledge other trail projects that are in the community and include those in the inventory. My understanding is some of those additional trails that are not managed by the Parks and Recreation Department are going to be addressed through the comprehensive plan look at trails and alternative transportation. And then finally, there was comments to consider the removal of 8 proposed tennis courts at Lions Mountain View Park to leave that park in terms of green space. Keep in mind, these are comments not by multiple people, but by individuals based on their interests. And so it's interesting to compare that to the feedback that we heard from the Parks and Recreation Commission when we met with them last week. First of all, just was super excited to hear them unanimously approve that this would advance to you all for your consideration and for adoption. So they recognize that there is some feedback that you'll provide that may reflect minor changes in the plan, but they are fully supportive of this plan as written. They did discuss the fact that the plan could have emphasized more strongly the fabulous job that Brad and his team are doing taking care of your existing sites and how well he has leveraged resources to be able to maintain city parks so far. There was a discussion around anywhere we mentioned revenue generation through fees and programs. They wanted to see that balanced with the fact that while we're looking at sustainable funding for the park system, we also want to ensure that things remain affordable for city residents. So they want to see that language balanced. They also discussed whether we need to place a greater emphasis on the fact that additional staff will be needed to operate the field house and to maintain the park system as it continues to grow. And again, there was conversation around Lions Mountain View Park to discuss options for those new tennis courts. Brad has context he can offer there. This is a recommendation for the 8 tennis courts that came from a previous site master plan. And as we vetted it, one of the things we recognize is that the city currently isn't providing tennis courts. So there is an important opportunity to add tennis courts to your system. I want to just add one final word from this. There were a couple of members of the public who showed up at this commission meeting. One of them was a woman who has been at several of the earlier meetings for the commission and originally was speaking about her concerns about aquatics in the community and her desire to see that shift. She was fully complimentary of this plan in terms of the priorities that were established in the way that aquatics, while replacing the pool is not the immediate priority, this plan did propose a strategy for moving forward to repair and replace that in the future. So that takes us to your discussions and your feedback with regards to the PROS plan. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have about it, or simply take your suggestions for any final revisions before we finalize the plan. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, Ms. Mendoza, thank you again for the presentation. Delano Palmer here. I'm just curious, as far as what was prioritized for the city of Ellensburg, is this similar to what you've seen in other communities, along with some of the obstacles that need to be overcome, specifically when it comes to funding, especially the operating and maintenance of it long term?
It is very similar. You know, I think we're all aware that the economy is potentially shifting. Everyone is making sure that they are first and foremost taking care of existing parks and facilities to continue to be able to maintain and operate those sites and make them usable for residents as well as visitors to your city. What I think we saw in terms of making sure that things were usable was first an emphasis on playgrounds to support youth and families in the community, but then also making sure that that field house project moves forward. And this is one where compliments to you all for finding a successful way to continue moving that field house project forward. I think what we're seeing across the region and across the nation is some communities not all together on board with consensus on how to move those big projects forward. So some of those larger projects have been stalling out in light of shifts. But it seems to me that Ellensburg has made it clear, both from you all as well as from the feedback we got from the public, that this is going to require a greater investment. So slight shifts to impact fees and tax rates and things may be in order.
Got a second follow-up comment to that. So going back to ongoing maintenance and operations costs for these items, obviously the O&M for a field house versus a park are different. So there's a different risk profile. There are different amount of FTE associated with these. Within the study, and forgive me, I have not gone through all 300 pages of it. Do we identify kind of that risk profile associated with one park rec amenity versus another? Not to say that an aquatic center should be or not be our primary focus, but it's to be able to identify that there's a significant O&M cost associated with aquatic facility versus the parks, and how we stage the funding for the O&M being critical for this.
That is a great question. The first thing I want to point out is there was a full operations study done with the field house, and that our information in this plan builds off of that more detailed look at operations and maintenance requirements for the field house. With that in mind, we also factored in things such as the fact that things have to be maintained at different levels. We created different tiers of maintenance levels even, so that sites that are less visible or not programmed don't require as much maintenance as sites that are generating revenues for you, supporting sports or other types of programs, and potentially bringing in a greater level of cost recovery in terms of the fees collected for use. So there is an economics impact piece of this as well. With regards to the aquatics facility specifically, that's where we identified recommendations on how to move that project forward, reflecting the fact that choosing a new site, the different types of amenities and facilities you might include in the pool, and other factors are going to affect your cost recovery rates and therefore your maintenance and operations costs. So that those costs have not been specifically determined.
Thank you.
This is Nancy Lilquist. The, the question that you had in the survey about willingness to pay is encouraging. I guess my question is, that's not a randomized, statistically valid percentages. How many, this is based on like 1,200 people responding? It just,
Correct. You have pointed out something that is very important, and that is that these types of questionnaires are often responded to by people who are most interested in the park and recreation system. Before any type of tax measure goes before the public, I would suggest conducting some type of a random sample statistically representative survey that tests different funding levels as well as potential project packages to find the right level of support and to have a statistically valid answer on the level of support across the community from all voters.
And I guess I'd just like to point out that our commitment about 14 months ago was for sustainable parks funding. And from my perspective, that includes, you know, the construction, it includes replacement, it includes operations, you know, all of those components that sometimes government forgets to include as we move forward. And we need to be a little bit conservative with our revenue estimates so that we don't end up costing more than we think it's going to cost. And then the last thing I'd also like to do, and this is maybe a complicated question, is there a way that we can look at our parks funding, both in terms of source funding and, you know, percentages, you know, if it's a sales tax revenue, whatever everybody's using, you know, sort of compares to ours, because I'm interested in finding out what our level of funding is. And it may be as it relates to our overall budget, it may be that there are avenues for funding that we might not be looking at. And obviously the important partner here is going to be potentially the county and finding a way to have a sustainable, committed revenue source to fund these projects, the bigger ticket regional items.
Yeah, and so I would just add that, and this is Heidi Barron Stornoway, I would add that, you know, the state provides a certain set of tools. They provide the options for cities for revenue. And so they're a pretty finite set of revenues. And so as we work through, especially this priority-based budgeting process, one of the items that we put forth is a way to actually capture the costs of services essentially and find ways to measure those over time. So that's actually kind of baked into that process. And I think we'll be able to find a solution to help you have more comparative information as we move forward for the choices you make.
Anybody else? Thank you. That was brief.
right?
Excellent.
Thank you.
So, and again, I would encourage you, if you have questions or comments, things that you would like addressed, if there are minor things, we can actually make some pretty quick edits to that. We would like to bring this back to you, possibly even at your next meeting, depending on how many changes.
I think just for community education, and we're going to get into this a little bit in the agenda when we start talking about the field house and the aquatic center, is educating folks as far as how the feasibility process works associated with the project. So it's not, we're going to go out and design a brand new pool facility. That's not the way this works. It's an evaluation of what are our existing facility, what are the potentials of it, can it be modified in its existing location to improve it for a significant amount of time? Will that be big enough to serve our larger community as it grows? Or do we need to plan for investments in it to maintain it, update it with a plan to make it bigger? So it's just to continue the public education piece of this. And obviously, reaching out and communication is one thing, people receiving that communication and then participating is another. So we'll continue to push that grassroots efforts on that. And probably the bigger education piece is the funding of the field house versus the aquatic center, and the fact that we've got some funding associated with the field house. So this is just to ensure that from a public perception, we're not disregarding one of those two ideas. It's the fact that we do have funding associated with the field house already, and we have got to implement it. And we're still looking at the aquatic center and what improvements could be made. So it's not to say either or, it's just to say that one is partially funded, the other one is not yet all the way in this is potential. So.
I'll just say I appreciate how the plan is laid out and giving us priorities and the extensive public feedback that we got. And I think it gives us a bit of a more clear path forward. I think that, you know, to Delano's point, we have a lot of questions around the aquatic center remaining. And you know, it'd be nice to have them all answered right now, so to make better decisions. But they're not, and so we have to proceed with providing the community what we can within our budget now. So, you know, and the other big question is, will the voters support a countywide taxing district? And, you know, the degree to which county residents participated in this survey and supported a willingness to pay, it looks significant to me. So.
Excellent. And I would just like to say, Cindy and the team at MIG have been fantastic to work with. They've done a tremendous job and we really appreciate them.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we're going to adjourn, reconvene at 1900 hours. There's two proclamations.